79th day of class, and we're going to be learning about Christopher Columbus. No surprise, we're in a world history class. We're going to learn about Columbus. And Columbus really produces very strong opinions in people. I've had students who feel Columbus is one of the greatest heroes in history. I've had students think he's a horrible, horrible man. I have some students who are somewhere in between. I have some students who don't know anything at all, and that's for us to find out. So we're going to be investigating this for the next few days here, and I'm going to ask you to go to Google, go to Salsiccioli Moodle. First thing that pops up is the history class. We are in Unit 3. And if you scroll down, day 79, and it says Columbus Investigation. So I click on this link, and in a second, the document will come up. And let me explain this document as you move forward, and we're going to be spending quite a bit of time investigating this. And it says Investigation Christopher Columbus. And here's the fundamental question. Was Columbus's arrival in North America a positive or negative event long term? And I'm going to read this to you. You can read along. Our human narrative began with small hunting and gathering bands that left Africa and spread throughout the world. When Homo sapien arrived in Argentina, it marked the beginning of the end of hunting and gathering as the dominant way to live. This led to the rise of agriculture and eventually civilizations along the four river valleys civilizations. Following the classical world established the framework and important cultural precedents for future people. When the Silk Roads and trans-Saharan trade routes were established, the world increased its hemispheric interactions greatly. This left our world interregionally divided along the four world zones of Afro-Eurasia, the Americas, Australasia, and the Pacific. What made our story global for the first time was the arrival of Columbus to North America in 1492. Now, many historians argue this was the most important event in world history. Now, I want you to research and make your own assertions, and this is going to be a big production here. So the first thing I had you do, and we did this already, is I started class and I told you to write down who Columbus was and what did he do, and I gave you 5 minutes. And I said no phones, no books, no friends, on your own. And I read them out loud, if you recall. Now, the gamut that I heard for people who were accusing him of slavery and murder and rape, and other people who were saying he was a hero, he was brave, he sailed the ocean blue, fearless. I heard the world is flat. He proved the world wasn't flat. That's a bit of a myth. But we had very strong opinions. And now we're at the second point, research. And we're going to be looking at different sources. And just a friendly reminder from the beginning of class, sources don't have to be written. They can be artifacts, they can be diaries, they can be journals, they can be pieces of art. There are other methods of getting historical research than simply, one form of it. There's many forms of it. That's my point. Now, here are some things I want you to consider in the Columbus investigation. Turning point. Now, a turning point is a term in history that whatever happens is going to affect things heavily from then on. So when Columbus arrived, turning point, is this a better world or worse world? If Columbus had not arrived, if the world was still separated into four world zones, would we have a better existence or a worse existence? And I want you to think about that. Now, causes and effects of this historical event. Columbus's arrival in October of 1492. Look at the politics. How did it change world politics and social movements and foreign affairs in terms of countries interacting? We see Europe on the rise, and we see them, fighting for imperialism and fighting for territory. Game changer. Science, technology, and innovation. Now, just to get across the ocean and to establish European communities, did that require science, technology, and innovation? Economic changes. Where did the power shift? Now, the Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, powerful groups. Europeans show up, and the Great Dying and the smallpox, real change economically. In terms of culture, bringing Christianity from Europe to the Americas, that's a change in culture. In terms of what was valuable in terms of cultural currency and what you learned, that's a change. Intellectual movements, that thing changed. Now, this is the area where people struggle the most. Looking at the context of the times, not in modern times, but going back to 1492, who had the power? Now, you'll learn that Columbus was funded by the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. Were they tyrannical? Were they appropriate? Was this Spain acting well or inappropriately? If you recall the Inquisition and the auto de fe, that might give you a little direction to what they were doing. Now, what tensions and conflicts were going on in Columbus's world? Why did Columbus feel a need to do that? Did Columbus have consensus? Was there critical mass? And I know people say, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't care what the group thinks. That's not necessarily true. If you are totally an oddball, you face some repercussions. Now, if you have everybody agreeing with you, it's a lot easier way to live. So did Columbus have the consensus of the people? Were people supporting his actions? And historical rules to follow. Please be respectful of other viewpoints. Now, we started off with our own views, a little epistemology, why we think what we think. Don't just write from that. Keep open-minded and look at other sources before you come to your own conclusion, like an investigation. You look at the evidence before you make your judgment. Incorporate other disciplines into your assertions. So what do I mean by that? I understand this is a history assignment, but is economics in the mix? So if I say the Columbian Exchange brought the commodities from the Eastern Hemisphere to the West and vice versa, economically, that's a positive thing. That's not history per se, but I'm incorporating economics. Sociology you can bring into the mix. You can bring in philosophy and morality and ethics. Were they acting ethically? So it doesn't just have to be history assertions you bring into your paper. My biggest thing is use evidence. Evidence. Not your opinion, not what you think, not what your hunch is, but cold hard evidence before you make your point. And again, contextualize the topic. What's going on in that time, in that place, not America in modern times. And please practice historical empathy. Again, looking at from the historical figure's point of view. Can you walk in Columbus's shoes before you make a judgment against him or for him or what have you? So what we're going to have you do initially is research. You're going to be researching 10. I gave you one, so it's actually 9 on your end. And I'm going to ask you, is it a positive, neutral, or negative viewpoint? What do I mean by that? Some viewpoints are very pro-Columbus. If I went to a Columbus Day source, they would be praising him, saying what a great guy is. That's a positive source. There are some groups that say he's genocidal, he killed people, he's a rotten guy. He's negative. Now, a primary source, so for instance, if I read his journal that Columbus himself wrote, that's neutral. Primary sources are always neutral, and that's what's good about them. So you're going to look at the source. In this column, write in, what does it mean? Simply, what does it mean? And how does it affect your view of Columbus? I'm going to ask you to do that 9 times here, okay? And then eventually you're going to write your assertion. And I gave a little prompt for those who struggle with writing. You don't have to. But essentially what it is, it's going to be a lead. You set the tone, you state your opinion and your thesis. This is the hardest, most important part. Now, once you have that established, you are going to make 3 points. I believe in A, B, and C, and you back it up with evidence and citation. So, for instance, you say, according to historychannel.com, it said, blah, blah, blah. According to the Library of Congress, it stated, blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm looking for. Paragraph 5 would be the counter-argument. You could say, I know some people disagree with the way I see things, and you kind of state your opponent's argument, but then you restate, I appreciate the counter-argument, here's where you're wrong, and you restate it. So I'm going to ask you to email it to me when we're done. My most important point of emphasis is think for yourself. Evidence, free thinking, don't be a puppet, don't regurgitate facts, that's easy. Think for yourself and keep an open mind. How should history view Columbus? And I hate to kind of be the heavy here, but I have to. All the papers, I'm going to check 1 citation from every paper to make sure it's legit. Making up citations, especially in this day and age, you cannot do that. It's imperative that you have reputable sources and you just don't, make it up or I believe and I think. No, that doesn't cut it. You got to back it up with that. Here's the rubric. You can check that out. What I'm going to use for your paper. Here's the criterion how I'm going to grade you. And it is a test grade. But more importantly, it's a chance for you to really flex your brain. Show me that you can think. And I've been doing this for a number of years. And the variety of answers I get always makes this a very intriguing assignment. And I have no doubt you're going to continue making it the same. So thank you for watching.